Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Nicole Forbes with Dennis's 70s, and today we are demonstrating a DIY craft that can be done at home and is a fun thing to do over the coming either snowy weather that we have or Valentine's holiday with a loved one or family member. So we have called it Kokedama for couples or Kokedama for dynamic duos. And really what this project is a form of bonsai. The term Kokedama literally means moss ball in Japanese. And what we'll be creating is either a hanging plant that has its roots encased in special soil and moss. And so we can create either a hanging Kokedama style or a resting or kind of, sitting Kokedama that can be displayed in a decorative tray or dish or bowl. And this is an example of an anthurium just sitting in a glazed terracotta saucer. Now, the form of bonsai is because as roots grow to the outside of the ball, the roots that hit air on the outside of the moss ball will actually air prune back into the little warm, moist space of soil inside the ball. So it is contained in that sense, and the plant growth is typically a little bit slower. So this is a botanic art that started hundreds and hundreds of years ago. The kind of legend or lore is that it originated in Japan in a small rural village where a bonsai artist had taken his prized bonsai creations on a donkey cart or an ox cart through village roads onto the bigger city to go to a bonsai competition or demonstration. And on the bumpy roads, one of his clay pots of bonsai fell off of the back of the cart and broke. And in haste, on his way to the competition, he scooped up the plant on the side of the road, encased the tender roots in moss that he found growing on the roadside as well, used some packing twine or whatever he had on the cart to secure the moss, and went on to the competition. When he presented his bonsai without a pot, the style really took off right away. So people loved the aesthetic of the natural moss foundation, the plant itself, and no pot to either benefit or detract from just the appreciation of the plant and its beauty. So there is where we have come full circle now to, through social media over the last couple of years, Kokedama has become kind of repopularized, reimagined, and sometimes you'll see them called moss balls, string gardens, or the more traditional term of Kokedama. We have kits available for you to either purchase online at dennis70s.com or come in and pick up that contain the soil, the moss, and the fishing line that would be what you'll need to create at least one regular sized Kokedama or two small Kokedama, for example. And so those kits are available online or in our stores, or you can purchase the soil in bags. If you wanted to make several Kokedama, you can buy the components and mix it all up together yourself. Now, there are some plants that are better candidates for this growing environment than others, and probably the most important defining factor is that these plants should be tolerant of drying out somewhat between waterings, and that's simply because this non-pot environment just causes evaporation a little bit faster from the root zone, so it does dry out a little bit quicker than a container plant would, although A hanging kokedama dries out much faster than a sitting kokedama. So even if you're going to go away on vacation and you have them hanging, if you just water them well and put them in a little tray, even a little bit of water in the bottom of the dish, they'll easily be able to last, but last while you're gone. So plants that are tolerant of drying out somewhat in between watering. So that includes cactus and succulents, epiphytes or semi-epiphytes, footed ferns like kangaroo paw, blue star fern, the staghorn ferns do beautifully, Nicholas diamond fern. I have anthuriums here that I've been showing, another fantastic plant in the aroid family. Haworthia, the zebra succulent, Haworthias do great as well. Bird's nest fern is one of the ferns that is tolerant of this environment and does really well. So bird's nest fern is one of the other non-footed ferns to use. Hoyas, Hoyas of all different types are real tolerant of drying out and have kind of a waxy leaf on their own. So Hoyas are really fun. And then today I'm also going to demonstrate using a Dracaena. This is Dracaena lemon lime that we will do into Kokedama. And we also see here a Pilea peperonioides that has been made into a Kokedama and then mounted onto wood. So if you have tuned into any of our previous classes, last month we did cover DIY mounting indoor plants to wood, which really starts with creating a Kokedama ball and then attaching it to either driftwood or corkwood or a type of wood. So now, if you are following along at home or if you're going to follow along at home, I'm going to try to start the process just like you should. So you're going to open up your kit. You'll take out the baggie of soil that you have, the moss that's been included in your kit, and then you have a little spool of fishing line. If you are working from home, you're going to make your soil mix with equal parts peat moss and bonsai soil. You're going to need some fishing line and something to cut the fishing line with, and a couple of bowls or basins so that we can be soaking or wetting some of this material to make it easier to work with. I also have a little bit of a plastic sheet down, which will help me keep my workspace a little bit clean because we're going to play with some mud and it's kind of a messy project. So best to, keep your space as clean as possible. First thing I'm doing is I've taken my sheet moss and I've put it into a little platter of water so that the moss can begin soaking it. Makes it a lot more flexible and easy to work with. So I've got my moss soaking right now, and I'm going to next put my soil into a container where I can add water. So again, just dump out that whole baggie of soil if you've got a kit that you're working with at home. If you see immediately like big chunks of wood, just go ahead and pull those big chunks out. Now little splinters, leave them alone, but big sticks and chunks of wood, go ahead and pull those out. And then we can give it a little bit of a stir. I tried to put all of the material in your kits in layers so that it blended pretty easily instead of all one, peat moss at the top and bonsai at the soil at the bottom. Now we're adding water to the soil mix, and we're going to let it kind of absorb that water for a little while as we prepare our plant. You may want to use gloves, but I usually don't. I like the contact. I like to feel the mud and get my fingers dirty. So again, adding quite a bit of water as we blend this up. I can see standing water in the bottom of my container right now, but as this peat moss, I still see dry peat moss, so I'm going to add more water. As we mix it, it's going to start absorbing more of the water. So, and you can see if you don't want to use, like your cereal bowl or a casserole dish, I'm just using a nice plastic saucer like we use to catch the drainage under a container. So you could always borrow one of those from your houseplant while you're doing this project and then clean it out. Okay, we're getting a nice muddy consistency. You can kind of see here, I don't have much standing water. I can see some moisture at the bottom, but I'm going to now just let that sit there and kind of absorb more water while I prepare my plant. Set this aside. And I guess before you get like both hands super muddy, just make sure that if you've got a kit and you're using your spool of fishing line, just unknot the two ends. One, the end that you'll start working with is just tied back to the other end. So just either snip it or knot it so that you've got it ready to work with. If you are pulling off of a spool of fishing line at home, typically I'm going to use 2 to 3 like full wingspans or arm lengths. I don't know what doesn't everybody call this a wingspan? Good. So 2 to 3 of these for my length of line. That gives me enough. I'll probably cut a little off in the end, but I'd rather have more than I need than not enough. So I go ahead and stretch this out 2 or 3 times, cut it off, and I have a nice long piece of line just sitting here waiting for me to use. And now to prepare our plant for the project, we're going to remove it from its container. First thing I do is I squeeze it a couple of times, or I turn it and squeeze it a couple of times. That loosens all the soil so that as I remove it from the pot, a lot of the soil is already nice and loose. And then I'm going to start just kind of shaking away the loose potting soil. What comes off of the roots without really doing much more picking or manipulating is just easy to remove. And then we can see that I've still got some soil on here and some roots. So I'm going to just kind of lightly tap the roots with the dirt in it. And just that light tapping is going to start loosening a little bit more of the soil. You don't want to make it completely bare, but we're going to take, 2/3 at least of the soil off of the pot, or of the plant, and away from the root zone. Now we have a nice root system to admire here for a moment, and just a container of kind of discarded soil. So now we can set our plant aside. We're done with our discarded soil. We'll go back to our blended soil and see if I need to add more water. So now as I pull together my container of soil, I'm going to start making a mud ball by just gathering it up in my hands like snow or dough or anything like that. Whatever runs with snow and dough. Now just start clay, if you've ever made, clay seed balls or anything like that. Just start working the soil into a nice ball in your hands, and then just keep kind of working with it. So as you roll it around in your hands, it's going to become a little bit more plastic or rubbery. You're going to get some of that moisture to kind of work all the way through the soil material, and it begins to form just a nice round ball shape. Now, because we've got those 2 unique soils, the bonsai soil, which is more gritty and porous, and then we have the peat moss in here, which is really soft and spongy. The 2 soils together make a very tight ball that still is soft enough and easy for plant roots to push through. So, of course, we know that it's working because it stays in a ball as we kind of, toss it around. And so once you've got a nice, navel orange size ball is kind of my best estimate. You're going to make a ball anywhere between an orange and a grapefruit. So that's your fruit size equivalent. Really, it's kind of limited by the size of your hands more than anything. So, and again, you can see the moisture content because it is dripping. The wetter the soil, the stickier it is, and the better it stays in a ball. So if you're working with me at home and your soil is crumbling, you need to add more water. So add more water to your mix and mix it up so that it stays together in a nice ball. If, as you're working from here on, the soil becomes crumbly, a spray bottle is helpful to just kind of spritz the soil and keep it nice and moist. But again, I've got plenty of moisture and I've got water down in the bottom of my tray so I can scoop up some more mud as I need to. So now that I've made my beautiful little mud ball, I'm going to set it aside for a minute. Make sure that my plant is ready. Yep, he looks ready. And I'm going to take the ball in my two hands, kind of put my thumbs up at the top, and with a little bit of pressure, you just crack the ball in half. I know it seems like it's not going to work, but it's amazing that it works. So once you've got it in half, you can set one side down and leave one side in your hand, because this is where I'm going to place the plant into the soil ball. We want to keep the soil line, kind of the original soil line where it was in the pot, about the same as where it is in the soil ball, and we want to make sure that the roots are all encased. So I'm going to kind of begin gently pressing the soil around my plant. And I say I've got roots hanging out the bottom here, so we'll have to clean those up as we go. I'm going to take the other half now. I'm going to put it back around. And now I'm going to begin, again, compressing the soil. This is where it begins to crumble a little bit, so I'm going to grab some mud from my basin to encase these roots, and just keep working that ball around and around and around until it starts to hold together in its form. So again, remember, adding moisture will help glue that soil together. It's not an easy project, or we wouldn't have to show you how to do it. It's awkward and messy, but that's fun. When's the last time you got to play in the dirt like this in the dead of winter in maybe a snowstorm? So here it's starting to hold together more, give it some kind of firm shaping the last minute. And now I can set that ball down for a sec, move my mud out of the way, go on to the next phase, just moss. So with our sheet moss, which has also been soaking, now it's nice and supple. You may need to wring it out even a little bit. And we want to lay our sheet moss. You may have a couple of different patches. So you're going to kind of work them together to create a kind of cohesive unit of moss that you're going to lay your Kokedama down into. So see how I wring that out. Lay the green side down in this case, because we're going to put the plant into the brown side of the moss. Now this sheet moss that's included in your kits is a glycerin preserved natural moss. So you'll see bits of like sticks and things that might be in the backing of it. But it's also had a little bit of a natural food coloring type dye to keep it green. You may see that the water that you've soaked it in has taken a shade of green, and if you left it sitting on like a white tablecloth for a while, you may have a green color come out of it. So again, you know, just keep that in mind and put it on a saucer or tray or plastic sheeting so that you don't discolor something that you didn't intend to. Now I've got the green side down, brown side up, my little patch of moss or assembled patches together. My fishing line is within distance, reaching distance, so I can grab that as I need to. And I'm going to scoop up my ball of mud. I'm going to set it right into the middle of the plant, of the moss. In the middle of the moss, I'm going to start pulling the moss up and around the roots, covering the ball. And you can see if there are overlapping seams, you can just trim the moss off rather than folding it up into the ball. So if you have extra moss, go ahead and just tear it away, and I'm sure you can use it somewhere else. trying to incorporate it under the ball is going to make it really lumpy and extra thick. So we don't necessarily want to keep all the moss if you've got like overlapping seams. And now we take our fishing line, and again, you've got plenty to work with. The first thing I do is I make a square knot around the midsection of the ball, basically kind of a tie around the equator, so to speak. I'm going to try to do it backwards here so you can see what I'm doing. Just decently tight, because we have everything hydrated and fluffy right now. So as the ball loses moisture, it's going to shrink a little bit, and we don't want it to become so loose then that our line slacks. So nice and tight, over, under, and then under, over is a square knot. Now I've got about a 4-inch tail that is what I'm going to tie back to when I finish wrapping the ball with the fishing line. So I'm going to leave that tail either kind of just dangling or try to, keep track of it as I wrap. And now you can transfer the ball into your non-dominant hand so that you can wrap with your dominant hand and just keep that fishing line kind of, out of your way. Now that it's attached to the ball, we're going to again wrap with enough tension that it's somewhat binding the moss together, and that once the moss loses a little bit of moisture, it doesn't again show slack. But this fishing line you can't see. We want to make sure that we're going underneath the ball several times, but other than that, we just want to wrap it up nice and securely. And you can go ahead and use as much line as you want, or you can wrap it until you feel like you've done a good job, and then cut, knot and cut the remainder. So just starting like you dropped a ball of yarn and it spooled out and ran down the hallway, and now you're just going to wrap the yarn back up. There's no technique to it other than that. So around and around, making sure we don't pass over the top of the plant. That's the only, that's the one rule. So getting close to the top and under the bottom. And I always try to continually wrap in the same direction. So again, with some tension, under and around, kind of hitting different latitudes as we go. More under. Nice and tight, but not too tight. You can see I'm squeezing a little bit of water out. It's okay. And here I'm going to go ahead now. I don't think I can go around one more time. So I'm going to knot it again to the end that we've left in the same fashion. Over, under, over. And this is where dynamic duos are great, because somebody can put their finger in the knot so you can get a nice tight knot tied. I've figured out how to do things on my own. So here, now we can cut our ends. You may have a slightly misshapen moss ball as it comes right out of production, but with some smooshing and reshaping, we can make it nice and round and shapely. And of course, this guy could, as mentioned, sit displayed in a saucer, or we can make a hanger for it. So I do want to show you how we make hangers, simply because that you have that option and it's important to know. So I prefer, in most cases, the sitting Kokedamas because of the ease of their care. But to tie on your hangers, there's a lot of line now going around your ball, which means that we have places where we can choose to attach our hanging lines to. So you can, again, maybe, I don't know, 2, 3 feet, go ahead. If you've got plenty of fishing line, it's okay to, be generous with yourself. That way you aren't short and trying to make do. So I'm going to cut 3 pieces that are similar in length. And again, similar. Three seems to be the easiest way to make a balanced hanging kokedama. And so taking one of your pieces, you're going to have to come close, Becky. Taking one of your pieces, we are going to tie it 2/3 of the way up the ball, and we're going to find at least one spot where 2 of our lines that wrap around the moss ball crisscross and intersect, and we're going to tie through that intersection. So I have really smart friends who use crochet hooks for getting in and in between all of the fishing line. I just use my tiny gardener nails to dig in there. But if I look closely, I can see the line, and I'm going to kind of pull up a couple of pieces so that I know that I'm at the crisscross between them. So there's one piece, and there's another piece. So if I tie through that little X, sometimes you have to pull the line through one piece, and I'll pull it through the next. You could go through several pieces even, and, oops, see, I didn't get enough. And make sure that before you tie it, that it feels like it's not gonna pull the whole support up and off the ball, right? So now I'm gonna just tie that. Same square knot, we'll clip the ends. Okay, there's one. Now, I'm thankful for this green tablecloth because it helps me see my fishing line. So again, I can't tell you how many pieces of fishing line I've lost on like white cloth or white surfaces. All of these things, we learn as we go, but it's a really fun project even if you end up with lost fishing line in the end. So there's one piece. We're going to tie 3, and they're going to be about, equally spaced around the ball. 1, so let's do 2 right here. I'll find, there's one line to go under. There's another line at the intersection to go under. Give that a little, yep, that looks good. Tie it. If you are making kokedama at home along with us today, one of the things, you probably don't care about making my day or not, but what would really make my day is if you give us a picture of your process or finished product or kokedama selfie. I would love to see that. So anyways, here is the third one. We've got 1, 2, so the third tie, and I go over here. I know fishing line, unless you're like a fisherman and used to working with it, it can be a little bit frustrating to work with. But we have used natural jute line, like just garden twine or natural twine. And what we find has happened is that it really breaks down quickly because the soil is wet, because you're dunking the ball in water to maintain it. Jute twine lasts about 6 months and then decomposes and needs to be re-tied. So that means that, your entire kokedama could fall apart and need to be retied if you use regular twine. At home, I have also used like thin jeweler's wire or like a nice flexible thin wire, which is really pretty and looks pretty on the ball, but it's a little bit harder to work with as well. So, you know, you can up your game over time with different materials. Okay, so we have our 3 pieces that we tied on equally spaced around the ball, and now we're just kind of bringing them up together, and I'm kind of testing out the angle that I want this guy to hang. Now, because it's not a trailing ball, because it is a Dracaena and it has sort of a center growth point, I kind of think it would be fun to have it grow at an angle, or to, you know, hang at an angle rather than directly up and down. So I'm going to tie it with that front line just a little bit longer so that it has that look to it. So I just loosened the line on that side, and now with all pieces brought up to the top, you can just knot them. And of course, if you wanted to make like a hanging hook itself, go you know, 3 fingers or 4 fingers up and knot it one more time. And now we snip the top, and we have like a hanging loop, and then we'll snip our ends. And there you have a Dracaena Kokedama with hangers. As you see in our examples that we have around, this is a cryptanthus that's been used, that's had kind of more standard sphagnum moss used on it. So rather than the green, it's a little bit more of a brown moss. You can see on the Haworthias that we made that instead of the green sheet moss, we've actually used the kind of silver stringy Spanish moss. And Spanish moss just has a different look and feel that seems to go, maybe, you know, depending on the plant, you could use different mosses to kind of, you know, change up the look and feel of it. The overall maintenance on the moss balls is really quite easy. First of all, it depends on the plants that you're choosing. So if you've got bird's nest fern, staghorn fern, or one of the lower or medium light plants, of course, using the appropriate light environment according to your plant choice. And then watering them, as I mentioned, ideally we're already choosing plant candidates that are tolerant of drying out in between watering. But watering them is going to be as simple as either just dunking or dropping the ball into a bucket of water. It could be, you know, 2, 3 moss balls could be watered together into a garden pail such as this, which is room temperature water. Or if you have a Tupperware bowl or a bowl that would be about the size of this ball, if you just set the ball down inside of the bowl and fill the bowl with water, leave the ball to absorb that water for 10 or 15 minutes, and then remove it from the water, you'll feel that the ball has gained significant weight. So we gauge the need for water by weight. This guy's pretty lightweight right now. This one's heavy because we just made it with wet soil and wet moss. So a light Kokedama, it should be ready to be watered, but a heavy Kokedama can wait to be watered until it's light. Again, based off of whether or not that's a drought-tolerant plant or plant tolerant of drying out. And the sitting style Kokedama, something that's in, for example, a glazed saucer, such as this, you could submerge it in water maybe every 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that, to get it fully hydrated. But once a week or so, you could add an ounce or 2 of water to the tray that it sits in, and just let the moss passively soak up that water to keep it relatively hydrated. Then really get it nice and saturated, every so often. So you've got choices as far as watering or watering maintenance goes. It is not, misting is not enough to water Kokedama. So again, remembering the importance of kind of feeling their weight to gauge how ready they are for water, and then watering them until they feel heavy. Outdoor Kokedama, again, should be kept in more shade. Depending on the varieties of Kokedama plants that you use, something like Apilia peperomioides, for example, most Apilias and peperomias don't like to have their leaves wet for too long or stay wet. So this would be a better plant to simply try to water the soil and the moss ball itself, and not try to put the whole plant into water. But other plants are less picky about that. So again, I could probably drop this whole Dracaena into a bucket and let the plant stay wet as well. So with that being said, I hope to see pictures of your Kokedama at home. I would love to hear about your experience, and I really thank you for watching today. So again, happy gardening.